All right, guys, so I want to make a video on finding the geometric mean, and we use that creating proportions with our triangles. So our first one is when we are given or when we can use the altitude in a triangle. So remember, the altitude is that middle segment, and that is going to be our geometric mean. So I'm going to put that in the spot for our proportion where the geometric mean is. So we're actually going to use this triangle on the right that I'm going to highlight. And I said the right, but I meant left. So the red one on the left and the purple one on the right, because those are the triangles that have the altitude in it. So for the triangle on the left, we'll also need, I'm going to call it this one here, the big leg. So the big leg is AD. All right. Over CD is the big leg in our purple triangle. So we already used CD, the big leg in the purple triangle. Then I use CD again, which is the altitude. So that would be our little leg in the red triangle over this guy would be the little leg in our purple triangle, so DB. Now, it's kind of a lot to remember. So we do have a little shortcut to use. So if we're given the altitude, I'm going to put some variables in here for us. I'm going to call the altitude A, and then we need this big hypotenuse from the big triangle. If we're given those, I call this the heartbeat method. I didn't come up with it, someone else did. But we're going to use X to start, and then the altitude, we're going to use A twice, and then Y. So I'm going to write it out again. So for a proportion, we'd have X over A was our altitude equals A over Y. So again, as our visual, I go along the hypotenuse till I hit the altitude. I'm going to go up, use A again, A again, and then across to Y. So if we see that X over A equals A over Y, using that altitude as my mean. All right, our second geometric mean type is using, and I wrote it up here, the length of each leg between the hypotenuse and the other leg. So here we're going to use the leg of the triangle and the hypotenuse of the big triangle. So we're going to have a hypotenuse and a leg from each one. But since we used our altitude over here, this would be when we're not given the altitude. So our first example would be when we're given, and I want my marker, not my lasso, when we're given a hypotenuse and a leg of one side. So for this, we would actually use, I'm going to start off using leg CB as my geometric mean. So this was a leg of the big outer triangle, so this big red triangle that we're using. So to help us work out this one, we call this the boomerang method. We're going to take the hypotenuse from the big triangle. So I'm going to use this bottom side. That's the hypotenuse from the big triangle, AB. And then we already used CB, that was the leg. So we're dealing with the big triangle now. Then we switch over to the other triangle. I'm going to use the hypotenuse of that triangle, which we already highlighted in red, that's CB, and the small leg of this triangle, which is DB. So I use hypotenuse, small leg, hypotenuse, small leg. But I remember this by calling it the boomerang method. So one more time, if you check out my triangle, I went out along the hypotenuse and up, and then back and down. So this orange, kind of like a boomerang shape, we used to remember. So that would be if we're given the hypotenuse and a leg from the big triangle. Same idea if instead of given that little leg, I was given this big leg up here. So now this other leg, so the first one was this leg over here. This is going to be my geometric mean now. So AC and AC. So for this one, we would need to be given this big hypotenuse. That's going to be our start. That would be BA, or AB, doesn't matter. And then I would have been given this leg of the big triangle. We already put that in there as AC. Then I'm going to use that leg with another triangle it's connected to. So AC again, and I'm going to go back to this green triangle and get this purple boomerang shape. So the last one I would need is AD. All right, so I'm going to make another video with some examples coming up, and you guys can check those out.